The atmosphere inside the Ed Sullivan Theatre was electric. Fans filled every seat, buzzing with excitement for another night of laughs and late-night insights. Cameras rolled, cue cards ready, and the band played its jazzy intro as Stephen Colbert, always effortlessly charming, strutted onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," Stephen said, his signature grin in place, "you know him from The Fighter, Lone Survivor, and Waking Up Before the Sun Even Thinks About Rising. Please welcome Mark Wahlberg." The crowd erupted in applause as Mark Wahlberg entered with confident strides, flashing his trademark smile. He hugged Stephen briefly and sat down, nodding to the cheering audience. "Man, they love you," Stephen said playfully as the applause died down. "They're good people," Mark replied with a grin. "Glad to be back." For the first few minutes, everything felt light and engaging. They talked about Mark's intense daily routine, early workouts, prayer, family time, and his latest film, an action-packed drama with a redemptive twist. Stephen teased him about his 2:30 a.m. wake-up time. "Who even sets alarms that early?" Stephen joked. "I don't need alarms," Mark laughed. "Discipline is the alarm." The crowd loved it. The chemistry between host and guest was working, until Stephen steered the conversation to a recent podcast appearance Mark had made, where he said he believed celebrities should avoid political discourse. Stephen, with his usual wit and a raised eyebrow, leaned in. "You mentioned entertainers should stick to entertaining. That seems like a strong take, considering the times we live in." Mark kept his smile, but there was a flicker in his eyes. "Yeah, I said that. I just think the public's tired of being told what to think by people who act for a living. We should focus on telling stories, not giving sermons." There was an awkward chuckle from the audience. Stephen tried to lighten the tension. "But what if telling stories is political? Isn't silence also a kind of message?" Mark shifted in his seat, his posture subtly defensive now. "Depends on what story you're trying to tell. I'm just here to promote the film, Stephen, not get into all that." A subtle chill passed through the room. Laughter was replaced with murmurs. The polite tension between two professionals was becoming something sharper, an undercurrent of disagreement that neither was yet fully acknowledging, but both were starting to feel. And the night was only getting started. Stephen adjusted the stack of cards on his desk, his expression remaining pleasant, but his tone slightly more direct. "So," he said, "you think entertainers should avoid discussing politics. But you've produced films like Patriots Day and Joe Bell, which dive into social issues, right?" Mark gave a tight smile. "Yeah, because those are real human stories. I'm not saying artists shouldn't tackle tough subjects. I'm saying people are tired of being preached at, especially when they're just trying to unwind." Stephen leaned in, his fingers gently tapping the desk. "Sure, but don't audiences also look to artists to reflect the times, to challenge norms? I mean, it's part of what storytelling is." Mark shrugged, eyes narrowing slightly. "And I respect that. But there's a difference between reflection and pushing personal agendas. People are sick of being told they're wrong for having a different view." The temperature in the studio dropped just slightly. The audience sensed something shifting beneath the surface. This wasn't just a conversation anymore. It was a duel of philosophies, two men with wildly different platforms and principles colliding in real time. Stephen, calm and calculated, offered a knowing smile. "It's ironic, isn't it? Coming on a show like this, which is known for its political voice, and expecting not to get asked about your own." Mark's jaw clenched subtly. "I expected a conversation, not a cross-examination." There was a stir in the audience. Some gasps, a few chuckles, and an undeniable tension crackling in the air. Stephen, still smiling but firmer now, replied, "I'm just asking questions. That's my job, like it's yours to wake up at 2 in the morning and deadlift small vehicles." The audience laughed nervously. Mark didn't. "I came here to promote a movie and talk to fans. If I wanted a debate, I'd go on a news show." Stephen took a sip from his mug, then set it down slowly. "Well, if you ever want to come back for that debate, the chair's always open." Mark smirked and looked toward the audience, then back to Stephen. "Yeah, I think I'm good." Something behind his eyes had shifted. An internal decision had been made. The audience sensed it too. Murmurs rose as Mark reached for the microphone clipped to his collar, beginning to unfasten it. Stephen raised an eyebrow. "You sure you want to do that?" Mark didn't answer. The tension had finally tipped. What had started as a light-hearted, late-night appearance had spiraled into something unpredictable, and there was no turning back now. Mark Wahlberg stood up slowly, adjusting his jacket as he peeled the microphone off his collar. The audience held their breath, some in disbelief, others intrigued by the unscripted drama playing out before them. Stephen Colbert remained seated, composed but visibly surprised. "You really walking off?" Stephen asked, his voice calm, but edged with a challenge. Mark looked down at him, his voice steady but cold. "Yeah, I've said what I needed to say. I'm not here to be made a punching bag." "You weren't," Stephen replied. "You just didn't like being challenged." The crowd reacted with soft gasps and awkward shuffling. The tension between them was no longer a simmer, it was boiling over. A few in the audience began to clap, unsure if it was in support or in shock. Mark looked toward the crowd, then back at Stephen. "You hide behind jokes, man, but when someone doesn't laugh along, suddenly they're the problem." Stephen leaned back, resting his elbows on the desk, eyes narrowed. "No one's the problem, Mark. But if you come on a show that thrives on conversation and critical thinking, don't be surprised when someone disagrees with you." That did it. Mark, visibly irritated now, stepped away from his chair. A crew member approached cautiously from the side of the stage, unsure whether to intervene or let it play out. The producers backstage scrambled to cut to commercial, but the cameras stayed locked in. This was raw television, and no one wanted to miss it. Stephen turned slightly in his chair, addressing the audience with his usual dry humor. "Well, I guess Mark's got to be up in 4 hours. Can't blame him for calling it a night." The crowd laughed nervously. Mark didn't look back. He walked off stage, disappearing behind the curtain as the band tried to strike up a filler tune. The applause was scattered, half stunned, half confused. Once Mark was off stage, Stephen turned to the camera and said, "That was Mark Wahlberg, everyone. A strong exit game, if nothing else." He forced a smile, but his eyes betrayed a hint of real frustration. The show went to a hard commercial break. Backstage, chaos erupted. Publicists scrambled. Network executives were already calling each other. Social media began exploding in real time. Clips, hashtags, hot takes, Wahlberg walkout, Colbert clash, live TV meltdown. The moment wasn't just a celebrity outburst, it had become a viral, cultural flashpoint. And it wasn't over yet. The next morning, the internet was ablaze. Headlines like "Mark Wahlberg storms off the Late Show" and "Colbert and Wahlberg late night turns heated" flooded news feeds. Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube were consumed with clips of the exchange. Millions had already viewed the fiery moment. Opinions were split. Some praised Mark for standing his ground. Others applauded Stephen for not backing down. At his Los Angeles home, Mark sat quietly with his phone buzzing non-stop. His publicist had already sent him a list of interview requests, advice on damage control, and a few suggested tweets to soften the blow. But Mark wasn't interested. His teenage daughter walked in holding her tablet. "Dad, you're trending," she said, half amused, half worried. Mark smiled faintly. "Yeah, I noticed. People are saying you couldn't take a joke," she added carefully. Mark looked at her. "It wasn't about a joke, it was about respect. Meanwhile, back in New York, Stephen Colbert addressed the incident during the opening of the next night's show. "So," he began, sitting behind his desk with a mock-serious expression, "I may or may not have caused one of America's favorite action stars to walk off my stage last night." The audience laughed. Stephen continued, "Mark and I had a disagreement. It happens. He's passionate. I'm passionate. The only thing that lost last night was my desk, because that was awkward." He paused, then got sincere. "In all seriousness, I respect Mark Wahlberg. We just didn't see eye to eye, and I hope next time we can finish a full interview, maybe with less heat and more hugs." That earned a mix of laughs and applause. Later that evening, Mark released a short video on Instagram. He sat in his gym, dressed down, authentic. "Hey guys. Look, I know last night on The Late Show got a little intense. I'm passionate about what I believe. So is Stephen. No hard feelings. We just see the world differently. That's okay. That's America." He ended with a smirk. "Next time, maybe I'll bring donuts to cool things down." Fans flooded the comments with support, memes, and, surprisingly, calls for a rematch, maybe even a charity debate. In the end, what could have been a PR disaster turned into a cultural conversation, not just about politics and entertainment, but about how disagreement, when met with honesty, can still lead to understanding. And somewhere, quietly, both men respected each other just a little more.